Welcome to HBTV. I'm HB, Harry Binswanger, and I discuss issues of the day, of the year, of the millennium from a philosophical viewpoint. I am a philosopher, and I advocate Ayn Rand's philosophy of objectivism, which I will be applying, although any original parts I'm adding are mine, not hers, of course. The topic for today is you can't lose the competition if if the U is a nation. America can't lose the economic competition to China. China can't lose the economic competition to the US. The UK can't lose the economic competition to Canada or the US, or no country can win or lose an economic competition because countries don't compete. Countries don't compete. Why is that? How can I say that? Because countries don't produce. Countries don't produce, countries don't consume. Individuals produce, individuals consume. Philosophically, this is the issue of collectivism versus individualism. Collectivism is a doctrine that some group, some collective, is the unit of reality and the standard of value. Meaning, for, say, Hitler's Germany, the folk, V-O-L-K, the people, the Volk of Germany was considered to be an entity above and beyond any individuals in it. It was what was really real to them in their theory. The individual was merely an abstraction from the Volk, the people. Black Lives Matter, right? The focus is on a collective, a race. The so-called black race, there really isn't any such thing as a black race. That's a made-up construct. There are certain physiological and biological differences of degree among peoples, but there really isn't any such things as the blacks or the whites or any other racial biological collective. There are populations that have more tendency to one set of characteristics than others, but it's not a real biological unit. But according to collectivism and according to the Black Lives Matter movement, the white man is oppressing the black man. The white man enslaved the black man. That's the collectivist mentality on the unit of what's real. And if you say to them, well, look, some white people long ago enslaved some people from Africa long ago, has nothing to do with me, has nothing to do with you, that won't hit home because they're collectivists. The unit of reality, what's real to them is some group, in this case, race. And when I say, well, it has nothing to do with me, yeah, it does, because I'm a unit of the white race. So the sins of other whites are visited upon me because I'm part of that collective organism in their perverted viewpoint. For individualism, in contrast, what's real is the individual. I am real. The white race or white people is an abstraction for a number of people who have varying degrees of certain physiological traits, which are pretty much irrelevant to me or to anyone else who has them. I won't go into white privilege, but maybe we should do another show on that, because that is the idea of white privilege is incredibly insulting to everyone who's not included as white. Incredible smear on African Americans, if we're calling them that. That sounds paradoxical, but that's what I'll show in this other talk. Unit of value or standard of value. Collectivism says what's good is what's good for the collective. What's good is what is socially just, is just to the collective, is fair to the collective. Or it's racially just, or it's good for the gender, or it's good for the class, or it's good for the nation, or it's good for the public, or it's good for whatever group they happen to be glommed onto at that moment. The individualist says the individual is the standard of value. You as an individual have your own individual good. It's not subjective. It follows from your nature, from what you are, from your attributes. But it's not the good of society that you should be working for. It's your good. It's not justice for society that you should be concerned about. There really isn't any such thing. There's individual justice, yours, and justice towards every other individual that you deal with. Now, these things, which sound so radical today, just 50 years ago in the civil rights movement, it was Martin Luther King who said, judge us by the content of our character, not the color of our skin. Character is individual. Actually, I don't even think he said us. I think a man should be judged by the content of his character, not the color of his skin, taking the individual unit as the unit of reality. And his character is his character as an individual. It has nothing to do with anyone else's character. But it's collectivism, the false and totalitarian notion that society is a real, or the race or the class, the collective is some real thing demanding that you live for it. That's the basis of both the idea of, well, we could be outcompeted by so-and-so country, and for every modern dictatorship. Before the Renaissance, before the Enlightenment, really, dictatorships, tyrannies were based upon the idea that the king is God's anointed on earth, the divine right of kings. So you had to serve the king because you were his vassal. He owned you. But that was too irrational to survive the age of reason, which is what the Enlightenment is known as. And it switched. The same mentality switched to your society's slave. The rulers rule by the divine right of social ordination, which is voting. So the people want Joe Biden in my country, or Bojo in the UK. They are supreme. Now, I'm in favor of voting, but not because I imagine for an instant that there's some godly status accorded to the will of the majority. The will of the majority is the thinking or non-thinking of a whole bunch of individuals, most of whom are just following what other individuals are doing. So most of them are just conformist anyway. But it's the best way to organize the society is to have majority vote decide the personnel, at least, of the government, or the administration, as you would call it. No, you call it the government, we call it the administration. You being the UK. So if you drop the idea that nations are buying and selling, and you realize, no, individual people, individual firms are buying and selling, you see that it makes no sense to talk about one kind of one group of individuals and cooperatives formed by individuals that live in a certain geographical area, outcompeting others, making different things, offering different services, living in another geographical region. For instance, let's concretize this. China's going to outcompete us if we don't lower our taxes. China's going to outcompete us. We're going to fall behind. Well, let's take just two well-known Chinese firms, TikTok and Huawei. TikTok offers consumer computer services of a social media kind. And Huawei offers all kinds of things like, I looked them up on the web, mission critical servers. They offer cloud services. They offer things to consumers and to businesses. Well, how is the fact that you buy or subscribe to TikTok so you can take pictures of your cat and put the cat dancing on the web or whatever you do on TikTok, going to affect the fact that Microsoft, a US company, is buying chips from Huawei or buying cloud services from Huawei? They just don't relate at all. Individual firms sell to people in America and other places from China. Individual firms buy from America and other places. All businesses are engaged in trading with their partners and selling to their customers all over the world. That's what globalism means. And if one company in a given geographical region is outcompeted by one company in another geographical region, that's going to mean that somebody in the first geographical region benefits. That's what it means to be outcompeted. So let's say Motorola is outcompeted by Huawei. Well, what does that mean? In America, how did they get outcompeted? Now, Americans used to buy from Motorola, and now they buy chips made by Huawei. What does that mean? They prefer chips from Huawei, products with those chips, to the ones with the chips by Motorola. So they're better off. They have gained, they have profited. A business outsources, an American business, outsources the manufacture of shirts to make them in Chinese factories, right? So the American firm does that because it saves money. It's profitable to it to outsource to Chinese labor so they can then sell their product at a lower price here. Who's winning the competition? Where's the competition? Well, they could have made there's a competition with the American manufacturer, would have made those shirts, the American, what do you call them? Sewing company, you don't call them that. So let's say, I'll give you two scenarios. Arrow Shirts makes shirts in the good old USA, but Van Heusen Shirt Company outsources everything to Canada, to China. So Van Heusen has a much lower cost of production than Arrow Shirts. So they can undercut Arrow shirts in the US. They can sell their shirts for less than Arrow can sell them. If Arrow meets their price, they will lose money on every shirt sold because their costs are higher. So Van Heusen outcompetes Arrow. That happens. Two companies in the same line of business, one will outcompete the other, which means one is a more efficient producer, right? But there's no competition here going on with China. China is a partner. And every time a firm or an individual buys or sells from a foreign firm or individual, it's because he profits from it. He profits either in that he gets, psychological profit. He's not going to resell it, but he gets a product he likes better. So he's benefited, he gains more than he would from some other company. Or it's literal dollar profit because he's going to use what he buys to make a product to sell. In either case, lower cost is better. Cost savings means time savings, which means life saving. It's a value saving. You can buy more if costs go down. If costs go down, prices go down. If prices go down, you can buy more different things and more of the same things that you like. So you get the picture. Some American firms will be outcompeted by some Chinese firms in the same line of business. A Chinese shirt maker who sells in the US may drive Van Heusen and Arrow into bankruptcy. Good, great. All Americans should applaud that. That means that the resources that were being wasted making costly shirts can now be invested in making something else. The country hasn't been outcompeted. One company has been outcompeted by a Chinese company, creating a profit opportunity for another company in an area that it has a comparative advantage over the Chinese, like maybe software development, maybe banking, maybe movie production, maybe advertising smarts, maybe technology consulting. I mean, there are just so many things that go on now. Maybe education. Now, it's true that our educational system is worse than China's overall, but not because we lack anything other than a rational methodology. And on the higher levels, it's you would come to American schools if you wanted to learn to be creative. At least this is my impression, my opinion. I won't go to the wall for this because I don't, just an impression. I don't have facts to back it up. But my impression is Americans are much more ingenious, creative, outside the box thinkers than any Asians, and probably than any other culture. But I'm ready to be corrected if there is some really creative group out there. I hope to God there is. The best thing that could happen to any country is to be, quote, outcompeted by another country. That means that production has expanded. Countries are now starting to specialize in things that they produce best. And the whole world's production goes up and everyone is better off, except the capitalists who had invested in the particular firms that are being outcompeted, like the people who own Arrow stock and Van Heusen stock, are going to lose money if the Chinese manufacturer supplants them. But invest in a Chinese company if you think that this is going to happen.
Harry, shall we pause here to take some super chats related to the things we've said up to this point? So to remind people, you can send your super chats priority. So the order of priority is super chats related to the topic. Then we go to super chats not directly related to the topic. Then we go to the members' questions. We already have a queue of them. Let's see in which episode we'll have some time to go through them. Okay, relevant super chats. Super chat from Adam. Thanks so much, Adam. Very generous super chat. Aren't you disregarding taxation of the companies that Americans trade with? Taxation that funds criminal, quote, governments. I don't like contributing to funding the mainland Chinese military, especially its coming invasion of Taiwan.
Yeah, I don't want that either. I don't want that either. You can't live by that means. I get your point, and let me restate it, that every time you buy goods from a dictatorship or near dictatorship or aggressive misbehaving country, which does mean a tyranny of some kind, you are funding the government of that country. And the government of that country, to the extent that it is controlled, is likely to make war on the less controlled neighbors, because this wouldn't apply to China yet, because they need scapegoats, victims, and loot. And this is the thing that no one but objectivists gets. Evil is impotent. Evil is irrationality. That's what evil is. It's blindness. It's self-made stupidity. So if you have an evil regime, it means they are destroying their own country. They're not a source of strength. The Italian trains did not, in fact, run on time under Mussolini. No government can do anything as well as private individuals, as profit-seeking, selfish, private, dollar-chasing individuals can do. So to the extent an economy is controlled, to the extent a nation is a dictatorship, as China is becoming, it weakens itself. Because it weakens itself, it wants to take over its neighbors, loot them, distract its populace from wanting to overthrow the dictators. And this is what's going on in China. And this is why my personal prediction, and if you look at my track record, I have a pretty lousy track record for predictions. Nevertheless, I can't stop myself. My prediction is Xi, the current dictator, is not going to last long. His re-tyrannizing of China, which had gotten much, much freer, is now turned, in the last year or two, he's turned it back really to bad, horrible statist dictatorship. That his doing that is going to be his downfall, because I don't think the Chinese people will put up with the economic disaster that that's going to produce. So the story on China is from the 1949, well, they just celebrated their 70th anniversary of China being all communist, 51 to 21. I think
recently was the anniversary of the founding of the Communist Party, not of them coming to power.
Oh, I see. I think the victory came in 1949.
And that's when the Mao also got nuclear weapons, I think.
He got nuclear weapons.
I'll check it on Wikipedia and I'll put it on the comments.
I believe that the Long March and all that was 49. But anyway, it's approximately that. So from then until sometime in the 80s, they were starving. How starving were they? Because they were communists, and communism cannot produce. You see that every communist and socialist country, they're poor. You cannot produce wealth at the point of a gun. So how poor were they during the 70s, for instance, during the Cultural Revolution, it was called? The New York Times carried an article. Now, this is all going back to competition versus combat, as we're going to see. The New York Times Sunday magazine carried an article, which I cut out and have at home, but I'm on vacation now, that outside the cities, it was a common practice for mothers to trade babies. Why did they trade babies? Because they couldn't bear to cook and eat their own babies, but they had to eat their children to survive. So they would kill, cook, and eat their neighbors' babies. This was reported in the left-leaning New York Times in the 70s. So that's how poor they were. Finally, in the 80s, was it Peng, I think, embarked upon a liberalization program, which means bringing back freedom to some extent. And they went pretty damn far, and the country rocketed ahead. The spectacular growth came from the moment they abandoned socialist communist policies, and they started having things like a stock market. Can you imagine a communist country with a stock market? That was a real innovation, along with some degree of private agriculture and a lot of degree of private profit that was allowed. So that went on until, about 3 or 4 years ago. There was a big anti-capitalist element, which was the theft of intellectual property. They did, no matter how liberalized they were, they did steal patents and copyrights and industrial secrets from us. But that isn't the thing that fueled their growth. That actually held them back. Short term, yeah, they can make an individual firm stealing something can get ahead, but in the long run, you don't trade with people who are stealing your patents. So they rocketed ahead, really rocketed ahead. For details, see Yaron Brook, who traveled there several times and was stunned at the progress and happiness of the people. Now they're clamping down. Over the last 3 or 4 years was cheap. And I predict that's not going to last, because it will be disastrous for the average Chinese, and they won't take it after a while. All right, that's another topic.
Also, for the record, Harry, so 49 Mao wins, but I mix the socialist countries. Soviet Union gets the nuclear bomb in 49. China has its first test in 64, but Mao wins in 49.
So when it comes down to 49 was the right date for China. Yeah. Okay. Is there another question?
Yes.
So I sympathize with the question. Yeah, I don't want to fund them either, but what are you going to do? Every country except the US and Canada is engaged in some kind of hostile activity against other nations, and they trade with China. So
another super interesting topic, because what you just said, the most popular view is no, it's the exact opposite. It's the United States that intervenes in every country in the world and has fueled dictatorship. So that could be an interesting US imperialism could be an interesting topic.
Yes, US
for a future episode.
Yes, that would be a good topic. Thanks.
So here's another question. Thank you so much, Corey. Very, very generous question. Very generous contribution. Thank you. So here's the question. It relates to what you said, Harry, about Martin Luther King's quote. So Corey says, could you be more philosophical with Martin Luther King's statement by rephrasing it as, quote, a man is to be judged by the content of his character, not the content of his characteristics. So content of the character, not of the characteristics. Or
no, you couldn't. You couldn't do it.
So here comes why he's asking. Or would this make no difference in driving the point home with collectivists?
Well, it's just not accurate, because you do judge a person by the characteristics that he has chosen to instill in himself. And that's why character is a good term to use. Character means a man's nature or identity from the point of view of what was automatized by his choice. His self-made characteristics are his character. The aspect of his psychology that he is responsible for through his choices. And let me just say one quick thing to disabuse people of a misconception. You don't choose your character consciously in every interaction. Few interactions do you raise the issue, am I going to have integrity or not? Am I going to be honest or not? Am I going to be just or not? Sometimes you do, but those issues come up even when you don't recognize them. And 1,000 times a day, you make little decisions that amount to, I'm honoring the best within me, or I'm doing something I don't really approve of. I'm dealing with this person fairly and openly, or I'm kind of faking it a little bit for him so he won't know certain things he'd like to know. So these habits of decision are made in big choices and in a lot of little choices. So it doesn't have to be, well, I sat down and I'm going to be a good person. That's not the way it happens. Okay, but no, you couldn't just say the characteristics, because that includes both innate and acquired characteristics, both volitionally established and physically established characteristics. That's why character was a good thing to say.
So Harry, why don't you continue now with the topic, but make sure, so you go on for something like 10 more minutes, and then we leave the last 15 minutes for more super chats. We had at least 3 that are waiting in line, and then we'll also have the members' question. So why don't you conclude on the topic of nations competing?
Yeah, okay. The fundamental principle of international economics was discovered by David Ricardo in the early 1800s. It's called the law of comparative advantage. What it states is, even if one country is better at having its citizens produce everything its citizens produce are done more efficiently than the citizens of another country can match, it pays them to trade. It pays both of them. So the example would be, suppose that the United States can produce with 1 hour of labor a shirt, and 2 hours of labor I'm trying to think something that would only take 2 hours, a pair of shoes. Okay. Whereas Bangladesh, to produce a shirt, takes 10 hours of labor, and to produce a pair of shoes takes 15 hours of labor. Nevertheless, it's going to pay them for each country to specialize in what it does better, and let the other country produce what it does better and then trade. So if the United States has a comparative advantage in shirts, so it can produce shirts on a 1-to-2 ratio with shoes, but Bangladesh has a comparative advantage the other way around. It makes shoes even though it takes 12 hours of labor to make a shoe versus 2 in the US, it's 12 versus 10 for a shirt. So it has a comparative advantage in making shoes. So if they concentrate in shoes and the US concentrates in shirts, I hope I've got the numbers worked out right. It pays both of them. More shirts and more shoes will be produced if they trade. So you can look up the arithmetic. It's just straight arithmetic about comparative advantage versus absolute advantage. And it's in all kinds of textbooks. It's not controversial. And that means on a personal level, that's the same thing as even if you can clean your house more efficiently than your cleaning woman, it pays you, if you are making $200 an hour, to pay $20, $40 an hour for a cleaning woman to save you that $200 per hour where you have your comparative advantage. So you have, let's say you are a computer consultant. If you don't have to clean your house, you have to pay, let's say, $40 an hour to your cleaning woman, but that frees up your time that's worth $200 an hour. So you save $160 on those hours that you're not cleaning. And it's the same among nations. So the fundamental thing is that it always pays to specialize, for firms and countries to specialize in the things in which they have a comparative advantage, and the absolute advantage doesn't matter. It's to both nations' advantage, if you look at it from a national standpoint. It's to the citizens' advantage in each nation. They will all be better off if this specialization occurs. More fundamentally, the reason why people don't get it, why they think that, oh my God, we're losing, we're going to lose to China, is that they confuse competition and combat. Competition, I define as two or more parties bidding against each other for the same good or service. Bidding to acquire rights by the consent of the party that's supplying the goods and service. Combat is physical destruction applied to someone in order to get things from him that he would not give you voluntarily. You take, you seize, you injure, rather than you make him happy by offering a trade that betters him by his own judgment as well as betters you. It's true that in combat, one country loses and the other country triumphs, but the triumph has a cost. So it's really lose-lose. But one country, like in World War II, the US lost, UK lost, the Allies lost, but the Germans and the Axis powers lost much, much more. That's why they were defeated. We still had resources to send soldiers over to occupy, and they could no longer defend themselves. So it's not like anyone gained. Oh boy, isn't it great we had World War II and had all those people die and all those tanks blow up and so forth. No, you want health, happiness, production, growth. Destruction is not the means to your values. But if you destroy a destroyer, at least you lose less than if the destroyer destroyed you. So it is lose-lose, but in the case of combat, strength and size and numbers matter. A bigger country with more people and more wealth is a bigger threat to you than a smaller country. So no one worries about being invaded by Yemen, except maybe the other Yemen, north and south. But I mean, the UK is not worried about Yemen invading. The US is not, Canada's not worried about them invading. But China is a worry. because China is a statist at, this last few years is a statist dictatorship. And they have a lot of wealth and power, physical means of destruction, not as much as people imagine. But the guy with the most bombs and, well, that isn't really, it's an oversimplification. It's better to have more bombs than fewer bombs. It's an oversimplification because even there, the rational beats the irrational, regardless of numbers. Did you know the British planted an astrologer on Hitler? Hitler believed in astrology, and the British Secret Service got an astrologer planted on him. Take D-Day. We faked them out. We, the Allies, faked out Hitler. He thought the attack was coming somewhere else. We fought smarter, as well as having more wealth to back it up. But it is true. A big, strong guy is a threat to a little weak guy. If they're fighting, if it's combat, if it's muscle against muscle, if it's the mind, then size doesn't matter. A not so bright guy is a help to a genius. The not so bright guy can handle his email. The not so bright guy can clean his house. So it is not, one person's intelligence is only a help to others, and the more intelligent he is, the more of a help he is. But muscle against muscle, bigger is more of a threat than small. So people confuse the two. And China is a military threat. I don't think to the US, but certainly to Taiwan and maybe Australia. So there is reason to think that the combination of military power and wealth that went to build that military power is a threat. But it's not the wealth that's a threat. Canada is per capita is much wealthier than China per capita. You got to do it per capita because it has 100 times the population of Canada. But the average Canadian lives much better than the average Chinese. Nevertheless, there's no threat to the United States or anybody else from Canada. If you understand that competition is bidding under a division of labor, then you can see that it's an action of cooperation. Only in a narrow view are two people who are bidding against each other in some sort of conflict. In the larger scheme of things, they are competing, and the one who wins is the one, if it's a free market, the one who is most efficient, who should win, who's got the most creative potential or actualize the most creative potential. And that's why he has more money or he values it higher. So let me end by asking you this question. When two people, we're talking about competition, when two people, not two nations, are competing for the same thing, the same good, let's say it's a ticket to the Super Bowl, a certain number of seats, and two people bidding against each other, who should get it? What is the fair and right way to decide who should get that good that only one of them can get, that they're bidding against each other for?
The obvious answer is who is going to give more money, although I would put the caveat, let's say someone really wants it and someone who has it couldn't care less, in which case someone could say, okay, give it to the other guy you don't really need it.
No, I have a deeper answer. Whoever the owner of that value decides to trade it to. It's the owner's property. The right answer of who should get it is who the owner decides to give it to. And by give, I mean trade for it with. So he might, say, well, that guy who's only bidding $200, he really loves the sport, and I like seeing that, and I'm going to give it to him even though this other guy bid $300. That's his right. And the fair and just and proper and moral and good thing is for the owners of property to decide who they're going to trade their property away to. Okay, you want to give me some more questions?
Yes. So today I have to say that I like the questions exceptionally because some of them are really good. Okay, let's start from this one, although it's not the chronological order. So Michael asks, looks like from each according to his ability to each according to his need is true within a family unit and is not altruistic. So does the maxim from which according to his ability to each according to his need, does it apply within a family? And can we say that in that context, it's not altruistic? So two questions. Does it apply?
Mm-hmm.
B, is it not altruistic?
It doesn't apply because the meaning of from each is the government will take from each according to his ability, and the government will give according to need. And what you're talking about in a family is the formula that Robert Nozick gave in answer to that question. From each as he chooses, to each as he is chosen. So if you're talking about a parent, and that has to be the context, the parent has two children, one has special needs, as they call it. The parent may choose to give more to that kid because he needs more, because he chose to have a kid and he's responsible, or maybe he loves that kid more. And the from each according to his ability doesn't apply. So you do, as a parent, you created a child, a being in need, right? You created a baby or a child who's not ready for independent survival. You chose to do that. Or you chose not to take precautions or not to abort. So it's your moral responsibility to meet his needs. That has nothing to do with your neighbor who's you did not give birth to, did not or not respond. But what if you did? What if you broke your neighbor's leg? Well, then you're responsible for taking care of the needs that you created. So any time you create a need in a person, or a person with a need in the case of birth, you are responsible and you have to fulfill that need. But you're probably doing it out of love anyway. But there's no taking from the people with ability. That part doesn't apply. And the other part, the whole context is from each according to his ability is about you and other people in society enforced by the state. It's not about what presents do you give on Christmas to those you love. I mean, that it just doesn't apply there. But I did want to say, if you created the need or the person in need, you're responsible.
Okay. Thank you to Christopher and Jeff for your contributions. Really appreciate it. So, super chat from Sally. Thank you very much, Sally. I'm sure you've heard about the mess happening in Haiti, but what is new, really, right? How would you go about changing that nation for the better if you could?
I can, but I've got better things to do. No, we pronounce it Haiti, right? Haiti.
Oh, sorry. In Greek, it's
no.
IT.
I mean, there's different ways of pronouncing it, and it's probably Haiti is probably correct. But I just wanted to make sure we're talking about the same place. Yeah, I can do that. I can cause the fall of China. So can you. All you have to do is get a big enough microphone and say to them, you are evil. you dictators. The people must rise up against you and claim their inalienable rights. And read them the Declaration of Independence and say, do not allow them to do this to you. In America and in the free world, people, everybody has a car, everybody has a nice home. You don't have to share your home with 3 other families, and just name what is. And the reason for that is that we are right. And your dictators are evil gangsters who have seized control without any right. They are immoral. You are not their slave. Throw them out. And if you could, if that were repeated, and if the people in America held that, those dictatorships would vanish. They'd be overthrown. And that's why the biggest fear of a dictator is of his subjects hearing that kind of thing. That's what they'll go to any lengths to prevent. They'll trade with you, but they won't let you spread your ideas, and they won't let you morally condemn them. China is very, very careful about not, you remember that speech a few days ago where he said, we're not going to be bullied anymore. Well, why wasn't I given a microphone to say, you mean the people, Chinese people, the people who are bullying you from the top, the people who give you orders, the people who won't let you live, won't let somebody else stop them. That's what they're saying. We won't be bullied. We, your leaders, we, your tyrants, won't let anybody work for the Chinese people's freedom. That's what, you could blow it up in their faces so quickly. What was the lesson of Vietnam? A pipsqueak country, and you have no idea how primitive they were, but I do, because I know someone who showed me home movies of how primitive they are, was able to virtually fight to a standstill, the strongest country in history, the United States of America. Why? Because of the peaceniks here, because of the left, because of the prestige of communism, which goes back to it being based on the Christian morality, which we talked about in an earlier session. They had the moral high ground, and that stopped us from fighting. We could not attack them because we had accepted their moral premise. So the lesson of Vietnam is morality trumps any weaponry, any manpower, any technology. Once you cut a person's moral motor, he's stopped. So that's what I want to do to dictators.
Putting also a pin on it for the episode on quote imperialism, because again the point would be, yeah, but the Vietnamese were fighting a national liberation war, therefore they had the moral justification within themselves and they would mobilize the population. But putting a pin on that. Okay, more questions.
But that's collectivism, a national liberation from what? The collective will wanted to destroy the individual. That's not morality. So it's
but at least in the first world,
national self-determination is not a valid concept. There is no such thing as the right of a nation to determine its own future. There's only the rights of individuals.
Super chat
but
from
we
Michael.
didn't say that. We didn't say that, Nikos. We let him walk all over us because we felt guilty for being rich. We Americans.
So super chat from Michael. You said in a previous episode, actually, that there's a possibility that humanity will wipe itself before it discovers objectivism. And Michael wants, if you can elaborate a bit, why do you believe that? So how do you see things going so wrong?
Because it's easier to learn about physical reality than it is to learn about the interior life of the spirit, of morality, of values. So people get ahead technologically before they have the right understanding of the principles of human behavior, starting with individual rights. China is a good example. They're pretty technologically caught up now, and you can get enormous destructive power while you're operating with a morality out of the dark ages. And that makes it possible for tremendous destruction to occur. And here, the frightening thing, you want to be frightened, I guess, is what the guy is asking. As technology develops, you become more and more dependent on it. So for instance, my cell phone, I was just in Canada, my cell phone didn't work in Canada. And I almost had a panic attack. It didn't work in Canada because I had a cheap provider and the provider didn't cover Canada. So that's the reason. But I went out to go to fill out some paperwork and do some stuff to prove to the Canadians that I wasn't going to kill them with COVID. And I got lost. And I couldn't just pull out my phone and put in the name of the place I was going and find out where it was. So I circled around and around this little tiny town called Huntsville, which you've never heard of, for about a half an hour trying to find a Walmart, stopping and asking people. So, I mean, that's one small thing of how we become dependent on it. But think of how many people have careers of like marketing consultant. Now, 120 years ago, at the turn of the century, way over 90% of Americans were farmers. And in other countries, it was way over 99%. So we had a few, non-farmers. But now, I don't know, it's probably about 10% of Americans are farmers, and they are big agribusiness farmers. So the whole food chain and everything that we require depends upon electric power and computers working, electronics. But we have man has the capability to destroy all that. And if that's destroyed, where is the bread going to come from? That's what's frightening.
Last question. So, by the way, to the members, I feel like James Taggart, who every time says I couldn't help it. Still, we didn't have time for your questions. I promise to you, I have in front of me a Word document with all your questions. At some point, we're going to get the time to ask them, but already we're in stoppage time. So last question. The filmmaker, again from Michael, thank you, Michael. The filmmaker George Lucas famously said, quote, "Your focus determines your reality. Your focus determines your reality." Is this the right way to conceptualize it, Harry?
No, but it's a very good idea. Meaning, reality presents you with a wide array of things. There's a million things going on out there. There's a million things you could look at just by turning your head. Well, maybe not a million, but lots and lots. So according as to what you focus on most, that is what's going to affect you the most. And your choice of focus is up to you. It's your free will. Now, a proper focus gets the whole terrain, looks at everything, and then zeroes in and keeps an eye on the other things from time to time. But a proper focus is not tunnel vision. Oh my God, I don't want to look out there because they're bad things. No, it's getting the whole picture and then zeroing in on your values. So it determines what part of reality is your predominant concern, what you focus on. And a big psychological error is to focus on all the small possibilities. I just saw this in Canada. I'm going to talk next week about the Canadian totalitarian state, which is governed by fear because everyone is focusing on COVID. Everyone all the time is focusing on the possibility that they will get COVID. Now, there is a possibility. I mean, Razi had COVID.
But let's say to people, he's fine, don't worry.
He had it recently, but he seems to be doing well, and he's here, and he's getting better and better. Don't worry. But if you focus on only the negatives, rather than regarding the negatives as well, they're there, and I have to prepare for them. If you focus on the negatives all the time, you become a frightened, paranoid personality. And if you focus on your values, acknowledging the negatives and taking precautions from time to time, you live a happy life.
That's a great point. Okay, so with this, we wrap up. I see, so Rise has put the link for the Ayn Rand Center shop. So I don't know if people knew that, but we have some merchandise with our logo and some of the people that you see in our content, and there's 10% discount on everything. So check it out. It's on aynrandcenter.co.uk/shop. So if you haven't checked it, check it out. Okay, and yeah, for members, 10% discount. So Harry, thanks so much. Despite the fact that you're away, you showed the commitment to do the episode this week. I think it was one of the best episodes. At least I got a lot of value out of it. So thank you. Big thank you to the Ayn Rand Institute supporting this series, supporting the promotion of objectivism everywhere in the world. So thanks everyone at the Ayn Rand Institute. And of course, a big thank you to our viewers, to the people who participate in the discussion, who send super chats. We really appreciate it. And we're really glad that we can bring a mind like Harry's to you. So thanks, everyone. Thank you, Harry, and see you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.